What are you two talking about?
Oh, nothing. Just the end of the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Who Pods the Watchmen? This is not our normal intro. I don't really know what our intro is going to be. I feel like we haven't really settled on that, Clay.
I like that one.
Yeah? You think it should be more game show hosts like this?
I think we should settle.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Who Pods the Watchmen? Then we have
I like it.
Da, 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 da. That's the Price is Right music.
Usually I say never settle. But right now, let's settle on that.
Let's settle, okay. Folks, we are back once again this week to talk about our ongoing dissection of the Watchmen tome. My name is Grant Davis, and alongside me is
Clay LaPointe.
And we are Watchmen enthusiasts, I guess you could say. I come from doing a whole lot of podcasting. I do a bunch of different shows. I have a podcast recording studio here in Austin, Texas.
What's the worst show you've done?
The worst show that I've ever reviewed? Oh, man.
No. Well,
Real Rob
either
was really
that.
rough?
I don't even know that one. I was thinking either that or the podcast. Like, what's a failure in your life? The show was good, but the podcast didn't work. And don't say this one.
Oh, man. A podcast that didn't work. I feel like I take podcasts and I'll just keep running them even if they're not working. Is this one working? Tap, tap, tap. Is this mic on?
Right. Okay, let's move ahead. What a way to start the show.
I was trying to introduce myself as a way of allowing you to introduce yourself as well. But I was going to say, my name's Grant Davis. I run a podcast studio here in Austin, Texas called Permanent RCRD Studios alongside my partner, Mike Moody. He and I kickstarted this podcast, but while he doesn't have time right now to go through the reviewing of the comic book itself, I've brought in my friend Clay LaPointe to join us. Clay, introduce yourself.
Happy to be here. Very close to here, actually. I think maybe that's one of the reasons you chose me. I live maybe 2 blocks from the recording studio.
Super convenient.
Exactly. So that's pretty much it. I do not have a recording studio. I don't have a history of podcasting, if you could not tell.
This is your first podcast, and no, I couldn't tell, because I think you are well articulated on certain things like this. You and I go way back. We went to college together. You have moved back since becoming a lawyer here in town to initiate a book club here, and we did a book club, and I was like, man, you can really talk about some books better than me.
This might be my longest relationship. So
you and me?
The 2-week podcast we're doing.
Oh. Oh, we have to keep this going, guys, for your heart.
Let's not edit this.
Not a bit.
No, but definitely happy to be here and happy to talk about this. And I think this issue, I know we might be talking about some reader,
we do have some listener questions.
The podcast, so they're listener questions first. But I thought this was an interesting issue. So
yeah, we're talking about Chapter 5 for all of you who are following along, and for people who aren't, just how about, do you have a little synopsis you would give of what happens in Chapter 5 for people?
Yeah, we could do a plot summary without any analysis. And I think it's interesting or important to do this because Chapter 4 was really kind of this throwback, or at least reflected, a lot of reflection going on with Dr. Manhattan. He's up there on Mars.
Bit of a flashback episode.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we didn't really see much plot development. We kind of saw why they're there, not what's going on in the moment. So we've gotten back to it now in a lot of different ways. And, you got to forgive me here. I'm going to butcher all of the names. What's the ink blot test that people do? Rorschach. So this one starts off with, again, Rorschach trying to figure out who is killing all the masks. And he was doing this in issues 1, 2, and 3. So no surprise. Now we're back to the present day. Or I guess it's 1985, 1986. He's doing it again. He shakes down an old hood who he thinks might have some information. That guy doesn't really have too much information, but we just see again that, Rorschach is establishing himself again as the underworld detective.
He's the crazy Batman.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. We see more murder in New York. It almost, in some ways it seems like it's reaching a boiling point. But at the same time, the violence is so removed, it's not that close to home. We'll see a lot of people, a lot of cops and investigators or detectives or whatever, they will notice that there's murder. They'll be on the crime scene, and then they'll talk about, oh, let's go get breakfast, or how's it going? Let's talk about the family. So in a way, it's at a boiling point, but I think he's just showing that, it's such a commonplace occurrence now, nobody gets too excited about it. We have the reintroduction of the comic book pirate story, or pirate comic book story.
The Black Freighter.
The Black Freighter. And that's kind of advancing in parallel to the events of the day in the comic book, which I think is interesting. We can definitely talk about that later. Dan and Lori become roommates. For those of you who are not following, they are two of the superheroes. And Lori was, I guess she was...
Silk Spectre, too.
She was Dr. Manhattan's sexy little ingenue?
Yeah.
Could we say? Yeah, his live-in... Yeah, his honey.
His child bride.
Yeah,
it was something weird.
Dr. Manhattan's honey. Dr. Manhattan goes to Mars, so then Lori has to find a place to sleep, and it's in Dan's extra bedroom.
You know the parallels here. Like, you and I used to be roommates.
Right.
And you know how that developed into a romance.
A podcast.
A podcast.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
It is very similar because, we see right after Dan invites Lori to stay that he's put firmly in the friend zone. And I would say we're friends. I think we're in the friend zone. Someone then tries to kill the rich guy, the rich retired masked crusader.
Ozymandias.
Vate?
Adrian Vate.
How do you know that?
I think that's how they pronounce it in the movie, too. Adrian Vate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've seen the movie. I haven't seen that either. So someone tries to kill him, doesn't go well. He actually kills them in return. But the guy actually, the assassin, commits suicide with a poison pill. So we know it wasn't just a random guy. There's something afoot. There's a reason Rorschach is investigating. And then followed up with that, Rorschach... what is it? Say it again for me.
Rorschach.
Rorschach gets set up.
Or Rorschach. I think Shack, more like Love Shack. Rorschach.
Yeah, Shack, yeah. So Rorschach gets set up and arrested at the very end, and that's how it ends. So we just see, we don't know what's going on. There's a mystery. Someone's going after the hoods, or I'm sorry, the masks, as I call them.
Either way, it sounds like you're from the 40s.
Yeah.
There's masks and these hoods.
Yeah.
I tell you.
I think his writing style is influencing me. But that's it. And so now we're kind of at a cliffhanger. We don't know what's going on, but we know something's happening.
I think that's a pretty good synopsis. This chapter is called Fearful Symmetry. And there's something. Well,
yeah. We can get into that, but do we have?
We have listener questions, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, folks. If you guys
what they want.
Give the people what they want, folks. If you guys are just tuning in for the very first time, welcome to Who Pods the Watchmen. This is a companion podcast to the upcoming HBO Watchmen television show. We are now taking a journey. In our eager anticipation for that show, we're taking a journey through the original comic book series and going issue by issue through the 12-part comic book and dissecting it, analyzing it, discussing it, and kind of, helping remind ourselves about what happened in this whole story. So this is a fun journey for us. We appreciate you guys tagging along if you are. And since we've been doing this podcast, we've been getting listeners kind of talking to us, engaging with us on some of our social media platforms, which, by the way, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, although I tend to hover mostly on Instagram. I find that one just more fun and engaging. And anyway, we got a couple listener questions that I thought we might try to tackle before we kind of dive into the meat of this episode.
Yeah, let's do it.
Does that sound good for you?
Let's go.
All right, so the first one, actually, this question came to us from Facebook. This came from Michael Cassidy, a.k.a. DJ Wheels, I believe.
Oh, with a Z or an S?
With a Z.
There we go.
So
my language.
That's legit. He says, what up, fellas? I was looking for a place to... blah, 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 blah. Let's jump ahead. He said he doesn't watch a whole lot of TV, but he's a huge Damon Lindelof fan after he discovered Lost in 2012. And he also loved The Leftovers. And his question is, I know absolutely nothing about the Watchmen comics or the movie. I've been listening to your pods to get an idea of the world. And to be honest, when I first heard Watchmen was Damon's next project, I was a little bit disappointed because I'm not into the superhero genre or comics really, and I didn't want Damon Lindelof to get hamstrung by source material again, like he did with The Leftovers. He talks like in the first season especially.
Right.
It felt like he wasn't able to blossom.
Which isn't unfair.
Yeah. So my question is, will the Watchmen allow Damon to do what he does best? Will he be able to shock us with mystery and plot twists still? Will he be able to create intriguing characters a la John Locke or Kevin Garvey? Adapting and remixing Watchmen has me concerned that Damon is doing more straightforward story without much mystery or plot twists. Is my assumption correct or am I off base? Basically, is Damon capable of pulling a wheelchair reveal or a "we have to go back" moment in The Watchmen? I hope so because he is great at it. Thanks for any feedback. You can just thanks for any feedback and thanks for the pod. Clay, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the reasons you invited me on here was because I am also a big Lindelof fan. The Leftovers is absolutely, well, you can't say, is it your favorite show on television, in television history? I know you're a big fan of other shows. For me, it's tough because we have so many types of genres of shows. I mean, obviously, it's not a sitcom or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, it's The Leftovers really blew me away, and I think he's right. I mean, season 1, even though it's one of my favorite shows of all time, I think I've only seen season 1 maybe 2 times, but I've seen seasons 2 and 3 like 4 or 5 times.
Right.
And I don't know if you feel the same way. It was just so bleak and so hard to watch and so plodding and slow. And I think it was important to build that structure and those elements. But at the same time, it's tough to watch.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, going to his question, the concern about the show, first off, I think it's really important to point out that Watchmen, the television show, is what is being defined as a remix. It is taking place in the present day, and it is assuming that the events of the comic book, not the movie, the events of the comic book took place in this world. And we are jumping forward, we're fast forwarding to 2019, and the show is kicking off in this world. Those characters from that past, some might still be around.
Oh, so it's a sequel.
Some aren't. It is a sequel.
Oh.
And it is adapting a lot of, it's presenting brand new characters, brand new storylines. It is not going to be a rehash of what we're going over here, but what happened in the past is relevant and informative of where things now exist in the future. And when we look at the trailers, we're seeing that whereas the comic book here is tackling a lot of issues of social anxiety with the impending nuclear war of the 80s, and the Cold War, just the distrust, as well as dealing with how one copes with masked superheroes and masked vigilantes. The modern day looks like it's going to be tackling a lot of distrust in law enforcement and power structures as well. And like the police are now wearing masks, just like the vigilantes were. And where do you draw the line? Where's the accountability? There's obviously a cult that has risen up as acolytes of Rorschach and his diary. And so this has, like, I'm saying all this right now, and I'm looking across at Clay, and Clay has not watched the trailer at all. So this is all probably pretty new, what I'm saying to you right now.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say this without spoiling anything, just saying, like, this is a completely different world.
I can be a sacrificial lamb. You can spoil. I'll forget it.
It's not this allows a completely open playground with a good blueprint of what the world was established as previously. And that's kind of what's great about this. This is exactly what is in line with what Lindelof was able to do with seasons 2 and 3 of The Leftovers. What he was able to do once he kind of broke off from J.J. Abrams' shadow in the initial pitch of Lost and went, oh wait, I can just like really dive into the mythology and I can go on these mysterious tangents. That's his bread and butter, and I think he's going to do perfectly with this.
And I could not agree more. And to speak to Michael Cassidy directly, is that it? Michael Cassidy. you're right that the wheelchair moments had this aha and this novelty to them, especially back then. Back then, I think it blew us away. Once you get into The Leftovers, seasons 2 and 3, it's just so beautiful. And the writing is so moving, and it just reminds you of what it's like to be a human being, even though circumstances are different. These people are going through the same exact things, and I think that he's going to do such a great job with this source material too, because I think it is rich with fodder about what you're talking about, social anxieties and I don't know necessarily a police state, but there's definitely power structures and
crisis
things like
of trust, crisis of faith. I mean,
Precisely.
Lindelof loves delving into faith, and right now, in this modern time, we are dealing with a world that has taken Dr. Manhattan as its new surrogate god. And what do you do with people that have now turned their faith and their belief to a worship of an unfeeling entity that's off on Mars, right? Like, what do you do with that?
Your salvation is a hollow icon.
Right.
My goodness.
And like, they don't care about you, but in a way, they're a little bit more real. Like, you have a modern history of that existence that you can draw from. So it's like, yeah, this person is there, and they could change the world if they had the will to, but do they care? And that's what was so beautiful about Chapter 4 that we just read.
Yeah, and just really quickly on Lindelof's position here, I think. And I think this isn't a secret. I think with The Leftovers, he realized, hey, everybody came after me, and it was pretty tough after Lost because, no one was happy with me. I actually was pretty happy. I mean, I think I came back from the Peace Corps, and I didn't have internet yet in my place, and I wanted to stream the last episode. And I went to a coffee shop with an old laptop, and I actually watched the last episode that way. And I remember I was just tearing up and crying in this coffee shop in Hyde Park in Austin because it was so moving. So. I really appreciated that, the whole series, and I liked the last season too. But I would say that I think, he took a lot of flack for that. He did some soul searching, and then he realized, with Lost, I was trying to, resolve plot points and explore plot points. And with The Leftovers, I didn't care what actually happened. I wanted to see how people reacted with what happened. Right. And that's what he did. And there's so much more richness and detail in that. And why can't he do it here? And it's going to be awesome.
And if people really need me to resolve all these plot points, how about I just make a theme song in The Leftovers that's just let the mystery be?
Exactly.
So such an ode to the fans that want something more. Calm the fuck down. It's okay. Just let the mystery be.
From the get-go, he was letting us know that. So anyway, yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think we'll see, and that's what we're looking forward to.
We got another question from Derek Dombrowski. This is over on Instagram, and if you guys follow us there, I might put up some question posts on our story eventually, or every so often when we do posts.
Did he slide into your DMs, or was it more of a public comment? What kind of guy is he?
It is a direct message because I put that on the forum so people could ask just directly to us.
Oh, okay.
So it says, what got you into the Watchmen? For me, in college, I was just recommended this as like, oh, if you're reading comics now, because I hadn't read comics really when I was younger. I don't think I really got into it until college.
Age of Apocalypse when we were 10 years old?
No.
Wow.
No, dude. Like, I watched Spider-Man, the animated series, and I watched X-Men, the animated series, and that was my wealth of knowledge of the Marvel Universe. And I watched Batman, the animated series. So, like, I watched TV a bunch, but I didn't read comics because I was illiterate. You know this.
Right.
But I ended up reading it in college when someone was like, you have to read The Watchmen. And I read this and I'm like, I'm too dumb for this. What's going on? This is like, there's a lot of complexity to what's going on here. This isn't like my usual comics where people are just punching people in the face.
Well, I think you sell yourself short, but I do think it's funny, you raise your unfortunate illiteracy. And I think that one of your favorite comics that we actually talked about last week or the week before is the Powers issue, where it's just kind of the silhouette, the against the day contre-jour kind of art style where they start off as cavemen or something, and,
right.
And I don't think there's any words in that whole comic, or maybe there's a couple. So
that was like one of the later issues.
Yeah, that's true.
Of the Powers series, but yeah, it's like this one lead character, Christian Walker. He was initially this caveman who just is immortal and lived throughout time, and you watch his whole like crazy fucked up timeline, and it's all without words. It's really powerful. And you bringing that up is really interesting because the very first comic of Powers, this was done by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Oeming.
Right.
The very first series is called Who Killed Retro Girl? And title, the Watchmen was initially going to be called Who Killed the Comedian? And I think that they borrowed a lot of the idea for what Powers is from the Watchmen. It was extremely influential on that one. And I was looking at the trailer, and the trailer for the upcoming TV show Watchmen, and one of our lead characters, Don Johnson, he is playing his name is Judge, but he's playing the head commissioner, police commissioner of the police in the Tulsa PD. This all takes place in Tulsa, by the way, Oklahoma. And I was thinking about, what if he has superpowers as well? Wouldn't he be a lot like Christian Walker, who was a guy who has superpowers, but he forgoes his super abilities to just be
He was a big dude.
To be a police detective. Exactly. Yeah. Him and Dina Pilgrim.
Yeah. Wow.
I remember those names.
I was going to say, you have a great memory for this. Jesus.
But I think it was just they have some really good iconic names in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, so for me, The Watchmen, it was one of those, I think Grant and I started reading comics again at about the same age, and everybody said you need to read Red Sun, you have to read Eisner, you need to read, I think, Blankets and stuff like that, and then The Watchmen was one of those. And I think we talked about it last week. I don't really remember reading this. When I see the art style, it clicks. I remember vague things about it. I remember these waves of plot points and plot development, and I think I've tried to watch it a few times on a plane falling asleep, the movie. So I don't really remember what got me into it. And I think also I think I mentioned this last week, I'm not really a big fan of the 80s art style anyway. So a lot of the Batman type stuff is lost on me. And I know that's unfortunate, but we don't choose who we are,
Let's lead this into our last question here. This comes from Swole Sauce Incorporated, Swole Sauce Inc.
He slid into your DMs for sure.
It says, do you think Watchmen influenced other mediums of entertainment outside of comics? And I think, inevitably, of course it did, but its first primary influence was comics, in that, it began to reshape a lot of, it in a way satirized and mocked a lot of how people were dealing with a lot of these comic characters. And even when they were trying to be edgy and dark, they were dark in a over-the-top sensationalistic way, where Alan Moore really kind of went, no, there's a more subtle and menacing aspect to if we had unchecked powers of superheroes, and how easy that is to exploit, and people to, claim they are doing the good will of the people, but who's to keep them in check? Who's to watch the Watchmen? And I mean, I want to say that kind of darker take on the accountability of superheroes did kind of bleed into other aspects of culture and television and film. But trying to think of specific examples, I don't know. I'm a little bit hard pressed.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. For Swole Dog Incorporated or whatever his name was.
Yeah,
Swole Mates.
Swole Sauce.
Swole Sauce. Yeah, I'm sorry. With Swole Sauce, you're the art guy. Did you see any print stuff is this emblematic or typical of the mid to late 80s, or is it an outlier? I actually don't know. The splashy colors, the art style.
This feels.
Let's get rid of the themes, because the themes obviously are. New York was filthy back then, right? And that's why Gotham City really took, was a big deal and all that in the 80s. Big city, people were afraid of them, white flight, everything like that, the crack epidemic, that was a big deal. So let's get rid of the themes. And I'm sorry I cut you off, but just looking at the art.
The art feels of the 80s to me, but it also feels really a little bit more pop iconic than some of the grungier, quicker, almost lazy, put it out there styles. When I think of early 90s stuff, I think of Jim Lee coming in with like his really complex and like distinct style that has a clear Asian influence in like what he was doing. But up until that point in the 80s comics, there were some fantastic artists still out there, but I'm always impressed with how clean and, like I said, iconic this stuff seems.
Yeah, I really think it's beautiful, and I think you can just think that this comic book is an institution. So really, whenever something's like an institution, you just kind of read it for class rather than read it for pleasure.
Right.
But really, when you look at the individual frames here, I mean, they're gorgeous. Just the shadowing and the shading is awesome.
Yeah, and the work that the color artist Higgins does is just fantastic here.
Jeez, another name. There you go.
Okay, well, we've answered some listener questions. I feel like maybe I should have done a little bit more homework on the larger influence of Watchmen in other aspects of our culture. I don't know on that one. Swole sauce.
Swole sauce, we have 12 issues. We won't let you down, baby.
But I do want to go ahead and dive into discussing the issue itself. This one is called Fearful Symmetry. And I guess we should start with first impressions. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, for me, I had 2 or 3 first impressions. The first one is evident from the get-go. And I don't know if people are following along. That would be awesome, but I know that's likely not the case sometimes with podcasts. But just the lights and the switching back and forth from red to blue to red to blue, or actually just kind of light on, light off, which for me was pretty awesome. And it actually, it goes along with the title Fearful Symmetry, and you can just really get the sense that New York is this living, breathing animal, and I think that's mentioned in the comic book. And I think it's maybe just coming from that red light is coming from the flashing of a neon like Chinese food or Indian food restaurant or something. So
it's called Rum Runner.
Yeah, okay, so that's what it is with that double R.
I don't know what that's supposed to be. Like a liquor shop, maybe?
Okay, maybe that's what it was, yeah. So actually,
but Rum Runners were pirates as well, so there's a little bit of a pirate theme. And we've discussed before, pirates were the superheroes of this era because since real superheroes exist, all the comics were based more on pirates. That was their pop culture of the time.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that I thought that was an Indian food restaurant. That's my favorite food. And so I think just by default, if I don't know what something is, I just hope it's an Indian food restaurant. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful. And it kind of reminded me just the first couple of pages, I thought of that kind of temporal resonance, almost like a clock ticking. And it brought me back to like Kill Bill 1 at the end, that fight scene where you have that like water metronome kind of thing when she's fighting outside. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Awesome. And right there, when they're waiting and you know that something's about to happen and the moment is pregnant with anticipation and this like upcoming violence, and you're just seeing how long each second lasts. I think there was a question on Reddit, on Ask Reddit this week, and, I mean, how cliche for podcasters to talk about Reddit. But somebody said, like, what's the longest 5 minutes of your life? And, when you watch Kill Bill, those 10 seconds seem like an eternity because, holy shit, like somebody's going to die at the end of this and somebody's going to they're going to be, that's almost artistry, the way that they're like swinging their blades and stuff, And here, this was the same thing. Like you really think tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock for the 9 panels. And then of course we think of the page before that, the cover, the Watchmen with the clock ticking towards midnight where, the nuclear bomb's going to go off or whatever. So it really kind of sets that tone right from the get-go, that thematic element that, hey, we're moving towards something, which I thought was cool, especially because chapter 4 was really just this kind of reflection, like throwback episode or issue. And now chapter 5, we're moving forward again. He's letting us know that.
And it's also pretty brilliant in how it reflects what was happening in the very first chapter when we're seeing the detectives in present time investigating the murder of the comedian. And in between, the toggling of panels was showing them in cool colors and everything with the comedian during his murder in bathed in a red palette. So this has already been established as a way to kind of toggle frames between two storylines, but now it's used as a metronome, I guess, if you will, like you were saying, to show the current flow of natural time going on in the panels here, but it's all played off of the blinking on and off of a neon light in the scenery. And I think that's just a really smart decision especially also following up on an entire chapter of chapter 4, which was all about a displacement of time, an irregular or an untethering from time of Dr. Manhattan, right?
So, yeah.
Like here, it's like, no, hey, we're back in a new chapter. We're back on track. Everything is happening in a nice, smooth, orderly, linear fashion.
And so now, obviously, again, we're marching towards something. But what do you think we're marching to?
Well, I mean, in this particular,
and no spoilers because I'm reading this in real time. What would you think? Have you read ahead?
I know what happens
Just from the movies, or just from Wikipedia, or what?
From the comic, and I know what happens in the movie. I know this story, and I know what we're marching toward. I know the impending.
If you were moi, Clay LaPointe, not a podcaster. Mm-hmm. Just a man in South Austin with 5 chickens.
You do have 5 chickens.
What would you think? Where are we going with this?
I mean, I would. You know the end of this chapter, so you know where this kind of spells a certain doom for Rorschach. What I think is interesting about this chapter 5, it's called Fearful Symmetry, and this is the chapter that a lot of people rave about. I don't know if you've noticed this, the precise symmetry of the panels of this entire chapter. How it is outlaid in the beginning is exactly mimicked in how it's laid out in the end, which is not just to say that it is the number of panels. It's 9 panels in the beginning, 9 panels at the end, and then if there's ever a blowout panel with like 3 panels combined into one at the top of like page 3. You're going to find that like 3 pages from the end as well.
Or like the Vate scene.
And Vate is on, dead center.
14-15.
When you see him swing this gold statue thing to club this guy to stop him from the assassination attempt, that is a dead center, and you can look at how all the panels mimic each other, and it's all about Vate. It's the detectives, you'll notice when they pop up on one page, they pop up halfway through, flipped on the other side. All of this entire chapter that's about Rorschach's investigation is a Rorschach mirrored panel construction as well, and how meticulous that is, and how much work that must have been in order to create this. That is such a testament to the
think of like the
nature of like working together, the collaborative nature of Gibbons and more, and I'm blown away by it.
Well, that too, and just think of a haiku, right? You set the structure, then you place art within that structure, and with that tension, with those limitations, you might be able to squeeze something extra out that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So, I think I had other things to talk about, definitely, but you just kind of made me think about something when you mentioned, how this one ends, at least, because I haven't read ahead. So when this one ends and you see Rorschach on the ground getting arrested, and you know that he's going to go to jail, or at least that's where he's headed. Mm-hmm. Do you kind of have an oh shit moment? Like, this dude might have been better on the streets doing his investigations, or, what was your impression? For me, I kind of thought he's better outside.
It's hard for me to divorce myself from where I know the story goes, and just try and like take this one as is. Like, I like that the beginning of this shows a confident, like, he's like Omar from The Wire. He's king shit of fuck mountain, right? He's walking down the street and everyone's hiding, and he is a man in control. And what we see is the mirror reflection of that, the opposite at the end, when he's a guy who's been set up and he no longer is in control, and he has his fall from grace. So I like that. He's a man on top. He goes, waltzes in, kicks in doors, takes charge of situations, shakes down the Moloch or whatever his name is, and gets his intel that he wants, and then moseys about and does his little journal entries and whatnot. And then on the flip side, everything falls apart. And now he's a guy that's been captured, and it's the big reveal of he's the guy who's been carrying around the sign. He's the guy who had the end is nigh. So we've seen him lurking about through this entire comic series, and he's been right under our nose. And I think there's something really telling about that as well. Like, as far as the big reveal, I remembered that from when I first read it the first time. I went, oh, it's that guy. But I'm sure you remembered at this point that detail, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I was just thinking, no, you're completely right. And I think that, I guess I'm just kind of thinking, we know it's marching ahead. Who's doing it? And I used to not really care about the plot so much because I thought this comic book was such like an institution, like I said, and we really kind of appreciate it. And now I'm actually kind of, with this issue, I'm kind of sucked into the plot. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And this is the first time, and it took what is this, chapter 5? Mm-hmm. It took 5 issues for this. And so while you were talking, I was kind of flipping back through some of those, and I got to on page 18 of the comic, if anybody's following along, top left panel. It's the note that set him up. And it says, call tonight, 11:30 p.m., have information, urgent, Jacoby, or something, right? And so if I'm looking at that, I'm not a handwriting expert. What's a handwriting expert called, like on the police department?
A letterographerist.
Right. That sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's that's it.
If you just take a quick peek at this, is this a woman's handwriting? Can a man, I mean, I'm generalizing here. I'm sorry. I'm going back to the 80s because, that's what we're reading about. So I'm generalizing like crazy.
Or is it a shaky guy with cancer? Shaky
somebody with glaucoma.
Villain's hand. I agree there. This is a setup, and if you look at the handwriting, it doesn't seem like the handwriting of Moloch necessarily.
Not at all. Not at all. Anyway, I'm playing with a limited hand here, if we're playing poker, but I'm just wondering, who could that be? It's not a man's handwriting.
I mean, we got a couple notes here. We got the note of Rorschach writing to Moloch, too, when he writes behind you with a little note in the fridge. And that's a
pretty crazy note.
Yeah. Behind you, and his little moniker is a little Rorschach symbol. It's pretty adorable.
Yeah.
He's really thought out his whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. What do you think? Because now we return to...
I'm dancing around stuff I want to say about, like, what happened.
No, I know, and I feel like that's kind of been the whole... I mean, again, you can do that. Like I said, I can be the sacrificial lamb because I will forget within a week.
I don't know.
So
I feel like what I'm going to have to do here in a couple minutes is have you step outside the room because I'm going to talk about some stuff that definitely happened.
Just let it out. Just let it out.
No, because it takes away from you.
Sometimes Diana and I are watching a movie and we'll get 20 or 30 minutes in and then we'll realize, oh, we saw this maybe 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't even years ago. We saw this 2 or 3 weeks ago and we're like, well, should we change it? No, we'll just see what happens because we've seen the whole movie, but we've forgotten. So what did you think about the return of kind of the gumshoe detective narrative? I mean, to me, it seems like it could be from the 1950s. In the writing style, I agree. I think it's good. I think you were talking about earlier about the writing and the structure of the book. I think it's good, but it's totally placed in that 1940s, 1950s Dick Tracy thing. Like when we have the detectives saying...
I mean, he's a man out of time, obviously, in more ways than one, that he acts like this old school kind of detective, and I'm sorry I cut you off.
No.
But also in a way that, like, he's still the lone wolf that's still operating outside the bounds.
You're talking about Rorschach.
Rorschach.
No, you're right about Rorschach for sure. But I'm talking about the detectives. Like if you're on page 7, they say, boy, what did he use on these? Kitchen knife. Their names were Claire and Dominique. Nice names. Sort of film star names. Yeah. So, you want to get some breakfast? Yeah. I mean, that's just from that's not even Hemingway, that type of minimalism. That's insane. So whenever you're reading that, are you thinking, a little hokey? Or do you just think, they're I'm just kind of thinking the way he structures these characters because later on they're talking in the police department, precinct or whatever, and he won't pick up the phone. He does this. They do the same kind of like who's on first, who's on second thing.
Right.
Know?
I find that I don't have much emotional investment in the detective characters themselves. They seem just a lens for us to get a glimpse of how society is coping in this world. But
all your emotions are going to Dan because he's been friend zoned with Lori.
Poor Dan.
I mean, he can't compete with Dr. Manhattan.
Poor
Jesus Christ.
Boring as Dan.
We've all been there.
Personality-less Dan. The only time he has personality is when he puts on a costume.
Yeah. No. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but so you were saying like you don't really. So do you think they're just kind of plot devices?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we don't know their names, and I don't know if we're ever going to learn their names. I think, they're just there to kind of fill us in on what's going on with the cultural landscape at the moment.
Yeah, so with Dan and Lori, pages 10, it kind of goes from there. What did you think about that scene? To me, I've never actually, I've read a lot of comics. I think you've been to my house, you've seen the comics on my shelf. I've been to yours, you have even more than me. I've never seen a scene like that where it's like the images are echoed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Because it's a mirror reflection that we're seeing at first.
Exactly. But
And
it's so disconcerting.
It fits with the whole Rorschach thing of we're seeing things mirrored already. And to introduce seeing characters talking, they're a little bit darker and shaded because we're actually looking at them in a mirror reflection. It's fascinating to me because I read this and I'm like, oh, it seems like these two characters should be talking, but the word bubbles are coming from behind them. And it took me for a second to realize, oh, that's because we're seeing their mirror reflections.
It took me like 100 seconds.
And I'm like, that's really smart in a way because, yeah, thematically for the structure of the comic, for what they're going for there, but also these are characters that lead double lives, and so there's a part of them that's saying something and a part of them that isn't that same person, right? Like part of them is Dan Dryberg and part of him is Night Owl, and the idea that they're speaking to each other and there's this separate world, this separate mirror version of them that is the same people we saw in the alleyway who got in a fight with all those thugs and they were exhilarated by that. That still exists within them, but it seems like sheltered and like cordoned off from them. They're not their whole selves.
Yeah. So two things about that. The first one, and maybe you spoke about this in the first few podcasts that I wasn't a part of, but talking about them getting into the scuffle in the alleyway. Do we know if any of these people, other than Dr. Manhattan, actually have powers, or are they just these Sylvester Stallone brawlers?
I would say no one necessarily has powers. The only one who seems closest is Ozymandias being a super intellect.
But he's just he just makes toys.
Oh, is that all he does?
Oh, wait, does he have something else going on that I didn't pay attention to?
He's super smart.
Is he?
Yeah.
We're talking about the rich dude, Veet or whatever.
Veet, yeah.
Oh, he's smart?
Oh, man. There are things I want to say to you.
I thought I'm sorry. I thought he had business acumen.
Yeah,
okay.
he's super smart. He's like Lex Luthor.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. How's that for a spoiler?
I mean, I'm a Marvel guy, so that really doesn't tell me that much.
Okay.
Sorry.
He's just a smart dude.
I'm a jerk. But, okay. And then, the other thing is, just looking at this scene again, you talked about not caring about the detectives. We don't know their names. Who do you care about? Because now we're 5 issues in, so we're on the wagon. You know what I mean? Like, we're on this path with it. We're not going to jump off. So who do you care about?
I care about the superheroes as an institution, I think. I care about like how they are coping and operating within this world structure. On an individual basis, I think there is still something admirable about Lori and Dan as kind of the everyman characters, and I think there's still a noble self-righteousness to Rorschach, despite his fascist tendencies and his Looney Tunes, other shit going on. So I would say those driving factors are still something I'm clinging to, as well as just the plight of humanity itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, talking about Dan and Lori and Rorschach trying to do the right thing and do extra, I do think there's this evergreen affinity for people who are trying to do more and also live normal lives. We see Dan and he says, "Hey, if you need anything, I'll be just down the hall." Then he kind of gets scared about saying that. And he says, in case you need like an aspirin or something, like, I don't know why people need aspirin in the middle of the night, but whatever. And
I didn't mean dick.
Yeah, exactly. So then, or he's a respectful guy. Maybe he meant like a foot massage or something. Yeah. Some Epsom salts, right? But then you see him in the bottom right panel of 19, just sleeping alone. And he's still sleeping on one side, which if you're a single dude and you're sleeping on one side of the bed, you're obviously pining for somebody. Again, I think earlier I was a handwriting expert. Now I'm a body language expert.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's just a really sad scene. And I think for me, like, it's hard enough for me every week to take the trash and recycling out on Monday nights. These people are doing so much more. They're trying to have these, it's kind of the Spider-Man thing, you know what I mean? So I think there is this affinity we have for these people. And so that's what I care about. I care about Dan and Lori, and I care about Rorschach a little bit. You know, you might say he's misguided and he has these weird tendencies. He could use some more friends and get out of the house a little bit more.
He's a very abused person who's now abusive. It's a cycle.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. But I mean, he's still trying to figure out what's going on with the people around him that he cares for and that he had some community with. So, you know, those are the people for me that I care about. And I mean, but do you care about the kid? And we haven't even talked about this, which I'd love to talk about with the whole comic book element, the pirate story. But do you even care about the kid and the newspaper vendor, or is he again just like the detective, just like a plot point to talk about the crazy anxiety with war and impending doom?
Plot point. I think that they are vehicles, like you're saying, for telling us, for illuminating the world and drawing thematic parallels, which is what the Black Freighter is doing plenty of. And man, I want to talk to you about what happened with that in a minute. But yeah,
sure.
I agree. Like those characters, I mean, I don't know their names. I find the stodgy old newsman actually a little bit unbearable. If I ever had to talk to that guy in real life, I'd be like, shut the fuck up, you idiot.
Well, it depends if it's a work day or a weekend. Because a weekend you might have more time. You could kind of get into it with them. But yeah, like if you got to go, you got to go. Yeah.
Just seems like a guy who likes to moan to himself to hear himself talk.
But he also believes it because remember on that issue 3, he gave that dude his shoes and hat and stuff like that. He thought
that was a
heartwarming
heartwarming moment, and then he like fell back into the same pattern of like, I see the news, I know everything.
Yeah. He's
He's crazier than Rorschach.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like you say you know these things, but this is humanity in a nutshell. But there's just this paralysis to do anything about it.
Well, and also he's big fish, small pond. He sits there at his newspaper, shack, whatever.
Right.
But what's he do?
It's his fiefdom.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely do want to talk about the comic book thing. And I don't know if you spoke about it. I'm sure you did because it's so interesting in the first few issues. Mm-hmm. Kind of give me a quick, if you could.
Before we get into that,
yeah,
let's talk about the Adrian Veidt scene.
Please.
Because he's walking down the hall. He's talking with his secretary, who says like, "Hey, we have a meeting for some merchandise stuff," and the toy people want to make some models of your villains. And then suddenly an assassination attempt happens. He moves out of the way. His secretary gets shot, and he beats this guy down.
Oh my God, I forgot that his secretary got shot.
Yeah, she gets shot.
Jesus Christ, what a day.
He beats this dude down, smashes his head in, he's bleeding, and then he reaches in his mouth to try and stop a cyanide tablet. What did you think of this whole sequence?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it didn't strike. I mean, obviously there was some violence, there was some action, which I think this scene needed a little bit.
Well, this is exactly at the halfway point, and this is where the tilt happens, I guess, for this issue.
Is that a technical term?
Well, the kind of the move to things no longer being what they seem, in a way.
Interesting. Okay.
Not only in it being a halfway point for that, but it's like it seems like not a whole lot of actions necessarily happening, and then suddenly things kind of take it up a notch after the halfway point.
So, and you just said the tilt. It made me think. Yesterday, I was talking with Diana about jumping the shark, and I mentioned it. She said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "I think it's from an episode of Happy Days.
You are
whenever
correct.
there was like, let's just say season 7 or 8. I'm making it up. Just things are running. They're running aground. There's nothing more to do. They're just treading the same water and over, and they decide let's get them water skiing, and then we'll jump over a shark." Because, maybe a shark's chasing us, they're trying to get away from it, and they jump over the shark.
They literally jump over a shark as a gimmick because they don't have any other interesting plot points.
And Diana said, it doesn't seem like they would jump over a shark in Happy Days. And I said, yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the point.
So,
do you remember in Arrested Development, they have Henry Winkler literally jump over a dead shark on a dock as an homage to that.
I don't remember that.
It's pretty great.
Anyway, yeah. So Michael Cassidy, really quickly, I don't think Lindelof will be jumping any sharks. We just talked about caring about certain characters, and he did such a good job with that in Leftovers, because at least for me, towards the end, And I'm sorry to go back to this, but towards the end, I didn't care what happened to the 2%. I cared about what happened to the characters there and what they were going to do with it moving forward. And that was the most beautiful thing.
We need to know the relationship of Nora and Kevin
And
Gardner.
Jesus, look at, I mean, the close-up shots of her at the end, it was so beautiful. And so, anyway, I think who cares about the plot development? I think that's important. And now that Grant has informed me that it's a whole new show, I don't really think he's hemmed in by anything. I mean, he can do what he wants, and it seems like he's with HBO. I'm sure they've given him the green light.
Yeah, and from what we've seen, we will see some of the other characters in there. Like some of these are OG characters, which is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. No, but, to go back to your original question, I'm sorry for moving away from that. This one, I mean, I guess I just kind of thought, whoa, he's still got it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty pedestrian take, but I mean, I thought, whoa, he can fight,
That is what I'm kind of curious about, because I do feel like at a certain point for us to have this kind of discussion of a retread of this comic, I need to start telling you about some things that happen in the future. And one of those is that Ozymandias is a brilliant, or Adrian Veidt, he's a brilliant mind and a brilliant architect. And he is a humanitarian, a charitable man, as the news vendor says. And for all intents and purposes, as far as we can tell, he is a great dude. Like he's a solid hero who has lofty aspirations. He knew he was prescient enough to see the writing on the wall of the Keene Act and was able to go, okay, I'm going to go ahead and step away from the hero gig, come out into the public and announce that, and then I'm going to move into the business world, right? What is interesting is the Black Freighter has a lot of parallels to once you've read through this comic and you see what happens with Adrian Veidt being a bit of a mastermind. You see the parallels of what's going on with our main character from the Black Freighter, where he is a man who is trapped on the beach. He is a man who sees the end of his world in the horizon. He sees the end of his island, as he says, where his family is, which if we take that for meaning the end of the world, he's like, I have my code, my convictions, but I'm going to have to compromise on some of those and do things that I never thought I would in order to try and save my family, in order to try and save my loved ones. And this very much parallels the story of Adrian Veidt, a.k.a. Ozymandias, which I found the foreshadowing here is more profound, more brilliant upon reread, and it's just so enriching because he goes and he digs up the dead bodies. He's eating gulls and stabbing sharks, and he's doing these kind of brutal things, in a way losing a degree of his humanity because he's a bit of a sacrificial lamb, just like you, Clay, are, as I tell you and ruin some of this story for you. He's a sacrificial lamb for what he ultimately sees as the greater good that he needs to achieve.
Yeah, and that's wild that you said all that, because on my legal pad here, I have comic book, greater point to be made by using death to reclaim or at least return to humanity, yet as you go down that road, you lose even more of your humanity? Or is it just a great story of a dude trying to survive? Cool art, like Prince Valiant.
It does very much seem like that. And you're right, though. You're dead on the first point. It's exactly intended. Like, the Black Freighter was used earlier as a means of paralleling what's going on with other characters, especially with, like, Dr. Manhattan, it seemed, in those earlier issues where he's a man who no longer has a home. He feels lost from the rest of society. He looks at his dead friends or these other people's bodies, and he no longer recognizes them. And I'm like, okay, so at that point, he was a surrogate for what's going on in Dr. Manhattan's tale. But here, unbeknownst to you and any fresh readers, he is a surrogate for Ozymandias' tale. And that's where going through a reread makes this so much more enriching.
Yeah, I thought this was so wild because do you remember in Cavalier and Clay where
I never finished it.
What?
I know. I'm
you know
so
what's
sorry.
funny? The first time I got the book, it was at Half Price Books, and I guess somebody offloaded all these defective copies.
I had
because
one
they
of
were-
those. There's a
Yeah,
wacky
the
misprint.
pages were it was almost like a choose your own adventure or something. And by the way, I'll just say this quickly. We might be going on long, but I remember in third grade, I saved up my money. Do you remember the Scholastic Book Fair?
Hell yeah.
Oh man, that was like the best. That was the best week in school. It might have only been like 2 or 3 days. That was awesome. So I saved up my money from doing chores at the house and stuff, and I found a Super Mario Brothers Choose Your Own Adventure. I mean, it was super sweet, best of both worlds, you know.
Yeah.
So I go home and I read it. Third grade, but I'm reading it maybe a fourth grade level.
You're a boss
I'm
back then,
reading
man.
it maybe a third grade after third grade in the summer level. I don't want to brag. And and I realized that, oh shit, this is a defective copy. Like it is supposed to be out of order by its very nature, but it's out of order the wrong way.
It's like in order.
So I go back. Yeah, I go back to this carny of a book vendor, and he tells me over and over and over, oh no, but it's supposed to be like that. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. But it's like that the wrong way. I never got my money back from that. And that
Son of a bitch.
and that's why I'm a lawyer. Because I thought I need to stick up for myself.
Never
in the future.
again.
Yeah, but so I remember Cavalier and Clay basically there's the parallel stories with the comic book and the interesting like superhero stuff, and then there's these two dudes living in New York wherever
These guys essentially created Superman in this fictional world, right?
So at the very beginning you're like, whoa, the superhero part's the most interesting, and then there's a part around like page 150 or so where you want to get back to the real story. And you realize, at the heart of every good story is just drama and just personal interactions and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the story gets so good that you don't really care about this outlandish superhero story. And this was like it here. I mean, I really kind of thought like we have this crazy. Look, it's not a normal story. It's not like these like Cavalier and Clay where there's just these two guys living in New York writing papers together or writing comic books together, because this guy's stabbing a shark and then using it as a raft. I mean, that doesn't happen every day, but it was interesting that I kind of was more curious about him than I was about the rest of the story, because it was this one man's journey and he's about to die. He's on the edge of death. And it was really cool to follow him.
Yeah, he's fucking surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And really quick, I mean, I know you're an art guy. Sorry. Did you notice
No.
like the whole, like, what would that be called? Like a dot matrix kind of effect he does with the comic scenes?
It's kind of a light halftone pattern thing that's going on, which is supposed to kind of mimic older comics that, had
It's sweet. It's
old
super
style
sweet.
printer.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so Ozymandias, when he beats this dude, he reaches in that guy's throat to try and stop him from swallowing a cyanide tablet. Now, did you just took this at face value? I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Like I usually do with everything.
There's nothing that made you think he possibly put a cyanide tablet in this guy's mouth?
Interesting. I'd like to lie and say I thought of that,
No.
but I took him at his word.
See, I don't actually remember whether or not that's how it goes, but part of me thinks that it's extremely possible that Vate hired this guy to put in a hit on him and then fought this dude and put a cyanide tablet and killed him so he couldn't say anything. Because
Wow.
this will lend to his cover from Rorschach that, hey, I'm also being accosted. I'm also potentially a victim in whatever this big nefarious
And
plot
if
is.
he had his assistant or secretary write the note in cursive, a woman's handwriting, as I thought, the circle is closed.
Dun, dun, dun.
Interesting. No, it's funny because I'm not really that interested in this guy because he kind of comes in and out. Whereas, I think Dr. Manhattan and Rorschach are the people we're drawn to.
Yeah,
and
he's
kind of
receded
out
into the
there.
background.
He's literally retired, right? And so who cares about a businessman that's marketing toys and doing licensing agreements? Whereas, yeah, you're right. That's pretty wild that he's going to become a more central figure.
Yeah. So that was kind of the other big point. I feel like we still have one unresolved point, which is,
Are Dan and Lori going to hook up?
are Dan and Lori gonna hook up?
Come on.
They gonna do it.
He's a good dude.
Yeah, she's a bad girl.
Is she?
Yeah, she got with a blue dude. And then that blue dude doppelganger and like 3 more blue dudes.
Yeah, she's been with too many blue dudes for him.
Yeah. He can't compete with that.
Oh, God. All right, let's keep going. It's making me sad.
Okay, so Rorschach gets set up. and how he falls into this situation and comes across Moloch with a bullet in his head. Did you think that Moloch shot himself in the head and committed suicide, or did you think that he was killed and this was a setup? I mean, I guess you obviously thought it was a setup because you thought someone else wrote the note.
For sure.
Yeah. But the gun is placed there, so I felt like when I first read this, for some reason, I thought Moloch as like a last-ditch effort when I'm going to at least set up Rorschach, and he's going to have to take the fall before when I die. I guess I wasn't necessarily thinking of like a larger conspiracy afoot. I don't know.
Yeah, I did not even get that deep. I just assumed it was a setup. It kind of creates more of a mystery for me.
It makes so much more sense.
It closes. It just kind of finishes something that's just beginning in my head. If he did commit suicide,
yeah,
and I think even Rorschach. I mean, why would the police be there?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, they were ready for the tip. They got the tip in advance, but still, it could have been like when he's saying, what was he saying, raw shark, which was such a good nod to the Black Freighter where he's eating a raw shark. I mean, sometimes they're clever in like a little bit heavy-handed ways, and sometimes I'm like, oh, that's just like that's a neat way to have that plot also sound like Rorschach.
Again, inconsistent. I mean, I think last week you said you didn't like that, and now you're loving it. You love wordplay.
I like wordplay used sparingly. I think when wordplay is every other panel, then I'm like, all right, cool your jets here, guys. It's a bit much. But I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. And I think, again, when we're in that scene, it goes back to the red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. And you kind of settle into that and you realize, whoa, something's going, And also there's so much action there. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, he's like lighting stuff on fire. He's throwing powder in people's eyes. I don't know what he's doing.
The red is now of the fire that he set in the house. And the blue is him hiding in the shadows of the house. And it makes for great tension. The shift between the lighting patterns.
And let's look at the penultimate page here, second to last. One time somebody told me that penultimate was their favorite word.
Really?
And I liked her a little bit less. And I just did the same thing. I thought, I'm on a podcast with my buddy, I want to show him that I can do this. Maybe he'll invite me back. I'm going to say penultimate rather than second to last. Why not say second to last? Why do we say penultimate?
I like penultimate, especially like when I'm talking about television. I always say
really?
The penultimate episode, because penultimates are usually better than the finales, I think.
Because it's been resolved and then it's just like the after.
Yeah, because they have a lot of like, okay, we have to kind of lead into next season or resolve everything for the whole series. But the penultimate one is usually bug nuts fucking bonkers.
Wow.
Yeah, watch a Breaking Bad penultimate, and those are going to be crazy. Watch Lost's penultimate episodes.
Yeah. So in the penultimate issue, then, since we're allowed to use that word, we see at the bottom right, he says "roral." Roral. He jumps out, roral. And I think of Walt Whitman, and he says something like, your barbaric yelp. He's talking about America. We Americans need to just, do what we do and just don't feel beholden to Europe and anything else. We can create art the way we want to. And it was beautiful. And I thought, that's a barbaric yelp, or yelp or whatever. Roral.
It is. It's pretty good.
He has a badass way of lighting people on fire, throwing, I don't know what it is, like anthrax, or it's probably like baking soda. He's in a house. Where did he get this powder?
It's probably a bunch of ground up sugar cubes that he got from Dan's house.
Yeah, but they're white. Remember, the sugar cubes are green for some weird reason in the printer.
Oh, yeah.
So you're right. He's throwing sugar around. He's lighting shit on fire.
It reminded me of that movie Three Ninjas with the little kids.
God, that was good.
Throwing the powder bombs in their eyes.
Have you watched Ninjago?
I have.
Oh, that's good.
It's pretty good.
We should do a review of that. I mean, maybe an ancillary podcast.
Next episode, we're just talking Ninjago.
We just do Ninjago.
We're off the rails here, folks.
It's not April Fool's Day. We were actually talking about Ninjago. No, yeah. So, I mean, I think, for me, I hope it's a conspiracy, or I hope, he's being set up, because that's going to lead to issue 6. And now I'm actually, I think the first one I did with you last week, I was like, okay, cool. I like this because it's going over the history. But this issue, I really think, whoa, now I actually want to know what happens. And I don't care about Dr. Manhattan. I don't actually care about superhero bullshit. I just want to see what happens with these people because that's interesting enough. And I like to be in that spot because then I actually care about characters. And he's finally done that for me.
See, that goes back to DJ Wheel's question to us about, I'm not big into the superhero genre per se. And to that, I would say this comic is not necessarily trying to glorify superheroes. This is not a Marvel movie. This is not even a DC movie. This is it's a mystery. It's a gritty crime drama, and it's kind of poetic in a way, and it's combining all of these. Yeah, it's a fun genre mystery, and that's what Lost was. That's what Leftovers is.
I think this is more Leftovers than Lost. Do you think so?
In so much as it's a little bit
takes more investment,
more adult.
Takes more investment. It's more adult. It's not just this shot like this cool novelty, and it's not shot like, oh, cool, we're going to see a tiger, or like a polar bear, or a dinosaur, or a smoke monster.
Right.
It's more like, oh, we got to sit here and we might read. We might, now, oh my God, heaven forbid, 2019, we're going to be bored for 2 seconds without looking at our cell phones.
Exactly.
You might be bored for a few seconds here wondering what's going on. And then on reread, you're like, oh, cool, I actually noticed the panels now. I noticed the lighting. This is actually art.
See, that's what I'm saying about this reread for me. I'm like, oh, I'm getting some crazy things out of this just because I know where a lot of these story beats are supposed to be going. It's so fascinating to me, how mapped out, when you map out a whole story and it allows you to kind of go back and be like, I'm going to boost up this whole angle over here in this because I know my end game now.
Absolutely. And, I think we might. Yeah, but when you say end game, I think that's where we are, where we don't actually know the end game. So it's kind of sweet now, and we're invested because you're right. We do want to stick around, even though we know it's going to be another 7 issues. Which who knows whether which of the issues are going to be bad, which are going to be good. But we're actually going somewhere now, which is fun. And I also like just hearing you say reread because I just think of Rihanna.
Reread, that's what I meant.
So anyway,
okay, I want to end on this. This is the end quote from this chapter. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Which is from William Blake. And I leave you with that. Clay, do you have any thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, I don't. I wish I could give you some. I actually don't know the poetry of William Blake.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to read Geek Love, we're doing that in book club in about 3 to 4 weeks. Which have you started that?
I have not started Geek Love.
I'm not surprised.
I thought it was about nerds, and it's about carnies.
It's about carny freaks.
So that's a little bit different.
No, but did you do any research on William Blake? Actually,
I did not.
Okay.
I think that the fearful symmetry is a great parallel for what's going on here. I think it's maybe a comment on the beauty and the menace of a tiger. Tigers are gorgeous. They're also deadly.
Oh, and as you realize how gorgeous they are, it's like Clever Girl Velociraptor. They're jumping out of the forest coming at you.
Yeah.
And so your last second is, oh, wow, that's gorgeous. And then you're sliced open.
Yeah.
Which we might get here.
You take in the power that you can respect in what's going on with them, but at the same time, it's your impending doom. Right. And that's that. I guess in that way, this reflects what's going on in this issue. How do you rank this among the issues of the comic so far you've read?
Yeah, I really love the last one, but it's kind of a standalone, so it's tough to rank it, you know, with the others. I think this was the best one for sure because, like I said, now I finally care about the characters. Now I finally see what Lindelof might want to do here, which now I know that it's not, he's not just redoing this. He's actually doing something 30, 40 years later. But, yeah, I think this was by far the best one for me. What did you think? Yeah,
I thought this one was pretty fantastic. It's a great payoff to what they've already established with these characters in this world. And it leaves us on the biggest cliffhanger with Rorschach, his face being revealed, and now we don't know what his fate is. And he was the driving force, the main protagonist who had any sort of initiative. I mean, we look at Dr. Manhattan, he's pieced off to Mars. We look at Night Owl and Laurie, and they're just complacent in their domestic lifestyle right now, in a way. And so, like, where does the story go if Rorschach, the one person pushing forward a narrative, is off the table? He's off the chessboard.
For the love of God, I hope he goes to a low-security prison like Jeffrey Epstein and just fixes the HVAC and plays tennis and lifts weights and gets a nice tan.
That's all. He's getting shaving down a lot of time in his mile swim.
Thank God for that guy.
He's doing great.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. I wanted to say, if you guys are liking this show, want to help us support us, you can go to patreon.com/whopodsawatchmen. There you can make a per episode pledge. Give us $1 or $2 per episode that we put out. You only get charged if we put out an episode, and we appreciate all of the support. You guys can also help us out by just following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you kind of find us, and share us with your friends.
And family.
Share us with family.
And hey, more questions. I love those.
Yeah. We'll definitely solicit for more questions for the next time we're back here in studio reviewing Chapter 6, I believe. And
we're gonna go in order. We're gonna be boring and just go in order.
We're going to Chapter 13. It's my fanfic I've written.
Plot along.
I hope you're okay with this. It's mainly just a lot of sex.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's a weird way to end this episode, but we're going to go for it. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and we'll be back next time.
Have a good night.